Heartbreaking news. Wendy Williams is being described as permanently incapacitated due to her battle with dementia and aphasia. Her guardian, attorney Sabrina Morrissey, made the disturbing revelation in court filings.
All make choices in life. We all go through our challenges.
Wendy Williams hasn't made a single public appearance on her own terms in over 2 years. Not one. And the woman who built her entire career on being loud, visible, and unapologetically in everyone's face has been completely silent. That's not retirement. That's something else entirely. For decades, Wendy was the queen of hot topics. She knew every secret, every backdoor deal, every relationship falling apart before the tabloids even got a whiff. She sat in that purple chair 5 days a week and told the world exactly what she thought. Nobody told Wendy Williams to be quiet. Nobody could. So when the silence started, people noticed. At first, the story was health complications. Then it was a slow recovery. Then came the documentary nobody asked for, the one that seemed designed to answer questions but somehow only created more. People watching that film didn't walk away feeling informed. They walked away feeling uneasy. Something about it didn't sit right, and millions of people couldn't explain exactly why. Here's what's actually going on. Wendy Williams is currently living under a legal arrangement called a guardianship. That means another person, not Wendy, controls her money, her medical decisions, and her daily life.
Heartbreaking news today about former talk show host Wendy Williams. New court documents filed by her legal guardian say she is now permanently incapacitated by her ongoing health battles.
She cannot fire her own team. She cannot access her own bank accounts. She cannot make a single move without approval from someone else. The woman who once told celebrities exactly how to run their lives has lost the ability to run her own. And the people closest to her, the ones who should be protecting her, they're the ones with the most to gain while she has the least. This isn't a story about a celebrity falling from grace. It's a story about power, money, and what happens when the system meant to protect someone gets weaponized against them instead. Wendy Williams didn't disappear. She was disappeared. And that's a very different thing.
The former talk show host was also the subject of a Lifetime documentary that was criticized for showing Wendy at her lowest, looking out of it, and perhaps not fully aware of what was going on.
Before we get into what's happening to Wendy right now, you need to understand who she actually was. Not the caricature, not the gossip girl the media loved to mock. The real Wendy Williams, before anyone had the power to rewrite her story. Wendy grew up in Ocean Township, New Jersey, in a middle-class family that had absolutely no idea what was coming. Her father was a teacher, her mother ran the household, and young Wendy was the kid who always had something to say. Too loud, too opinionated, too much. She heard that her entire childhood and decided early on that being too much was actually her greatest strength. She broke into radio in the late 1980s, and she was immediately polarizing. Stations fired her. Program directors told her she was too raw, too aggressive, too willing to say things out loud that the industry preferred to keep behind closed doors. She got let go more times than most people could survive professionally. She kept coming back.
Wendy was last seen in public at a holistic store back in August, taking a photo with a fan in New Jersey.
By the late 1990s, she had landed at WBLS and then Hot 97 in New York, and that's where everything changed. Her radio show became required listening in the hip-hop world. Artists feared her. Publicists dreaded her calls. She outed careers, exposed relationships, and said the quiet parts loud before that phrase even existed. She wasn't just a gossip host. She was a cultural force. Here's the part people forget, though. Wendy built everything herself. There was no network backing her from the start, no powerful mentor clearing the path. She ground her way into relevance through sheer will and an absolute refusal to be shut up. Every door she walked through, she kicked open herself. That matters. Because the woman sitting in a guardian's control right now isn't some passive person who needed someone else to manage her life. She was one of the most self-made personalities in American media history. Remember that going forward. So how does a woman like that end up where she is today? How does someone with that much fire, that much fight, end up with another person's name on her bank accounts? The answer starts with a diagnosis that the public was handed and told to accept without question. In early 2023, Wendy's team announced she had been diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia and aphasia. It was framed as an explanation for her absence, a medical reason why the show ended, why she hadn't been seen, why everything went quiet. The public largely accepted it, because what else do you do when doctors make a pronouncement? You believe it. But here's where the story cracks open. Multiple sources close to Wendy, including medical professionals who have since spoken on the record, began raising serious questions about that diagnosis. And in one of the most stunning developments in this entire saga, reports emerged that doctors had walked back key elements of what was originally presented to the public. The dementia diagnosis that was used to justify taking control of Wendy's entire life was not as clear-cut or as permanent as everyone was told. That's not a minor correction. That's the foundation of her guardianship being pulled out from under the story. Think about what that actually means. A guardianship, the legal arrangement that stripped Wendy of her autonomy, was built in large part on that medical picture. If that picture was wrong or exaggerated or selectively presented, then everything that followed deserves to be looked at completely differently, and Wendy herself has pushed back. In moments when she has been able to speak, she has expressed confusion about her situation, frustration about not being able to access her own money, and a clear desire to work again. Those aren't the responses of someone too unwell to participate in her own life. They're the responses of someone who knows exactly what's being taken from her. Now let's talk about the documentary, because if you want to understand how deep this goes, you have to look at what happened when cameras were allowed inside Wendy's world, and more importantly, who allowed them in. In 2023, Lifetime released a documentary about Wendy Williams called Where is Wendy Williams? The film was supposed to be a look at her life post-show, a chance for the public to see how she was really doing. What it actually showed was something that made viewers deeply uncomfortable. Wendy appeared confused, visibly distressed, and in several moments seemed completely unaware of what was being filmed around her. People who watched it didn't see a woman being supported. They saw a woman being exposed. The backlash was immediate. Critics, fans, and media figures all asked the same question. Who approved this? Who looked at that footage and decided it was appropriate to broadcast? Because if Wendy genuinely lacked the mental capacity to make decisions for herself, then she also lacked the capacity to consent to being filmed in that condition. And if she did have the capacity, then why was a guardian controlling her life in the first place? Either way, somebody made a decision that was not in Wendy's best interest. A lawsuit was filed against the production company behind the documentary, and for a brief moment it looked like the courts might actually force some answers into the open. Then the case disappeared. A quiet settlement was reached behind closed doors with no public disclosure of terms, no accountability, and no explanation given to the people who watched that film and felt something was deeply wrong. When lawsuits settle that fast and that silently, it usually means someone had something significant to lose if the truth came out in open court. And the truth that nobody wants to say out loud is this: that documentary may have been less about telling Wendy's story and more about cementing a particular narrative before anyone could challenge it. So who exactly is pulling the strings here? Because there's a name that keeps coming up every time you dig into Wendy's situation, and it's a name that carries a lot of weight in this story. Sabrina Morrissey. She's the court-appointed guardian who has been managing Wendy's life and finances since 2022. Morrissey is a New York attorney who specializes in exactly this kind of arrangement, stepping in as a professional guardian for high-net-worth individuals who have been deemed unable to manage their own affairs. On paper, it sounds like a protective service. In practice, the people closest to Wendy describe something that looks a lot more like a lockdown. Wendy's brother Tommy Williams has been one of the most vocal family members speaking out. He's gone on record stating that the family has been blocked from regular access to Wendy, that their calls go unanswered, and that attempts to get information about her medical care have hit wall after wall. He's described the situation as his sister being isolated from the people who actually love her. That word keeps coming up from multiple directions. Isolated. And isolation is a tool. Anyone who understands how coercive control works knows that cutting someone off from their support network is one of the first and most effective steps in maintaining power over them. It doesn't matter if that isolation is dressed up in legal language and court orders. The effect is the same. Wendy's former manager, Bernie Young, has also spoken publicly about being cut out of her life completely, despite having worked closely with her for years. He's described trying to reach her and being unable to get through. He's raised concerns about whether the people currently managing her affairs are actually serving her interests or their own. When the family can't get in, when the long-term colleagues can't get in, and when Wendy herself is saying she wants to work and can't, you have to ask who exactly this arrangement is protecting. And then there's Kevin Hunter, the ex-husband, the man Wendy stood by for over 2 decades while rumors swirled constantly about who he really was and what he was really doing behind her back. If you thought his role in this story ended when the marriage did, you haven't been paying attention. Kevin Hunter was married to Wendy from 1997 until 2019. During that time, he served as her manager, her business partner, and according to people in her inner circle, the primary gatekeeper between Wendy and the rest of the world. He controlled access. He controlled deals. He controlled the narrative around her public image while allegedly running a separate life entirely. one that included a long-term relationship with another woman that eventually produced a child. When that story broke publicly, Wendy filed for divorce within days. It looked like she was finally free, but Kevin Hunter didn't go quietly into the background. After Wendy's guardianship became public knowledge and her financial situation started making headlines, Kevin Hunter resurfaced with a claim that stunned everyone following the case. He began publicly pushing for involvement in Wendy's affairs and made statements suggesting he was owed somewhere in the range of $260 million connected to his years of work building her brand and managing her career. He framed it as a fight for Wendy's best interests, positioning himself as someone trying to rescue her from a broken system. But the people who watched him control and isolate her during their marriage weren't buying the hero narrative for a single second. When a man who allegedly spent years deceiving his wife suddenly shows up demanding hundreds of millions tied to her estate, the word that comes to mind isn't hero. The audacity of that move is hard to overstate. This is the same man Wendy publicly described as someone who broke her heart and her trust completely. And now he wants back in, specifically at the moment when she's most vulnerable and least able to speak for herself. Some people call it concern, others call it opportunism dressed in expensive clothing. Either way, Kevin Hunter circling Wendy's situation while she sits locked inside a guardianship is one of the most uncomfortable threads in this entire story. And it gets worse from here. Because here's the question that should be keeping everyone up at night. Wendy Williams spent roughly 2 decades as one of the highest paid women in daytime television. Her show ran for 13 seasons. She had perfume lines, a production company, merchandise, book deals, and a radio career that predated all of it. By any reasonable estimate, she should be sitting on a fortune substantial enough to last several lifetimes. So where did it go? The money trail behind Wendy's finances is genuinely alarming once you start pulling at the threads. Wells Fargo froze her accounts back in 2022, citing concerns about financial exploitation, which was the first public signal that something had gone seriously wrong with her estate. From that moment on, access to her own funds was cut off, and control shifted into the hands of the court-appointed guardian. What happened to the millions she earned across decades of work is a question that still doesn't have a clean public answer. And then there's the matter of what the guardianship itself is costing her. Court-appointed guardians don't work for free, and professional guardians handling high-value estates charge accordingly. Reports have indicated that Sabrina Morrissey has been pulling significant monthly fees directly out of Wendy's estate as compensation for managing her affairs. That means every single month that this arrangement continues, Wendy's wealth is being drawn down by the very system that was supposedly put in place to protect it. The guardian gets paid, the lawyers get paid, and Wendy sits in an apartment reportedly funded by her own shrinking estate, unable to touch a dollar of it herself. This is how guardianships can become traps rather than safety nets. The meter is always running, the fees accumulate, and the person at the center of it all has no mechanism to stop the bleeding because they've been legally stripped of the ability to make that call. Wendy earned that money. She ground for it, fought for it, and built it from nothing. The idea that it's now flowing out through legal fees and guardian compensation while she can't access a single cent of it is the kind of thing that should make anyone furious. And yet the courts have allowed it to continue. That's the part that's hardest to sit with. There's a legal system that's supposed to have checks built in, supposed to require regular reviews, supposed to ensure that guardianships don't become permanent arrangements when they were only ever meant to be temporary. On paper, judges review these cases. On paper, the ward's best interests are always the priority. On paper, there are protections. But Wendy's case has exposed just how wide the gap is between what guardianship law promises and what it actually delivers when money and lawyers and competing interests are all in the room at once. The reviews happen, but they happen inside a system where the guardian controls most of the information being presented to the judge. Wendy doesn't have her own independent legal representation that she herself chose and hired. The people making arguments in that courtroom are largely people who have a financial stake in the outcome. That's not a neutral playing field. That's a room where the game was already decided before anyone sat down. Wendy's family has tried to push back through legal channels. Her brother Tommy filed court documents attempting to get more transparency around her care and her finances. Those efforts have moved slowly, hit procedural walls, and produced very little in the way of public accountability. The legal machine that locked this arrangement in place appears far more efficient at keeping people out than letting them in. And Wendy keeps signaling in whatever fragmented moments of access she gets that she wants out. She's expressed a desire to return to television, She's talked about wanting to host again. In recorded conversations that have made their way to media outlets, she sounds lucid, aware, and frustrated. Not confused, not incapable, frustrated. There's a massive difference between those things, and the people controlling her life appear to be banking on most people not noticing it. The frustration in her voice is the loudest thing in this entire story, louder than any court filing, any lawyer's statement, any carefully worded press release. She knows what's happening to her. She just can't stop it alone. And that frustration finally boiled over in a way nobody expected. Because Wendy Williams, the woman the system has been trying to keep quiet, found her voice again. And when she used it, the message was impossible to misread. In a moment that sent shockwaves through everyone following this case, Wendy Williams spoke out directly from inside her assisted care facility. The phrase she used, "get off my neck," wasn't random. It was deliberate, defiant, and loaded with the kind of clarity that nobody who supposedly can't manage her own affairs should be capable of producing. She wasn't mumbling. She wasn't confused. She was angry, and she wanted the world to know it. That kind of fight doesn't come from someone who has lost touch with reality. It comes from someone who understands their reality all too well and refuses to accept it. The response from the people controlling her situation was predictably muted. No press conference, no direct answer to her words, just more silence from the same machinery that has been running this arrangement from the start. When someone under a guardianship speaks out that clearly and that forcefully, and the people in charge respond with nothing, that silence is its own kind of answer. What Wendy did by speaking out matters beyond her own case. There are thousands of people across the country currently living inside guardianship arrangements with no platform, no fan base, and no way to make the public hear them. Wendy's situation has a spotlight on it purely because of who she is. Most people in her position have nothing. Her fight, whether she wins or loses, is pulling back a curtain on a system that operates in the dark by design. The woman who spent 30 years making sure nobody's secret stayed hidden is now the one with the biggest secret being kept on her behalf. And she is not done fighting, not even close. The story of Wendy Williams is still being written, and the next chapter depends entirely on whether the people watching are paying close enough attention to demand better for her. Wendy Williams built her career on one simple promise. She would always tell you the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it made powerful people angry, even when it cost her. That promise is exactly why what's happening to her feels like such a gut punch. The woman who never let anyone else control the narrative has had her own narrative completely taken over. But here's what they didn't count on. The public is watching. The story is out. And once people understand what a guardianship can actually do to a person, once they see the gap between the protection it promises and the trap it can become, that awareness doesn't go away quietly. Wendy gave 30 years of her life making sure you knew the truth about everyone else. The least we can do is make sure the truth about her gets told just as loudly. If this story hit different for you, drop a comment below and tell us what you think is really going on. Like this video if you think Wendy deserves better than what she's getting. And subscribe to Backstage Culture for the stories behind hip-hop headlines that nobody else is telling the way they actually need to be told. See you in the next one.